Tonight, the vaccine for kids. Pfizer releases new data on the safety and effectiveness of the shot to protect children from COVID-19.
I've spent a lot of time with the team on these things. There's likely to be approved.
Plus, the supply chain crisis deepens and leaving parents in the dark.
Parents aren't aware, so that law enforcement isn't aware, and I think that had a direct impact on how they handled both of these rapes.
Multiple reports of sexual assault in a school bathroom. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Expanding the pool of COVID vaccinations. What new tests show about vaccine protection for young kids? Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup. We will get to our top story in a moment, but first, the Supreme Court once again is allowing a Texas law banning virtually all abortions in the state to stay in place for now. The fate of the law is fast-track or set for a fast-track decision by the Supreme Court, which is now scheduled to hear arguments on November 1st. The Texas heartbeat law bans abortions after about 6 weeks of pregnancy before many women know they're pregnant. It also puts the onus of enforcement on citizens who are financially rewarded for bringing lawsuits against anyone aiding an abortion. Well, back now to our other top story. The country is one step closer to a vaccine for young children in the fight against COVID-19. Pfizer releasing new data today showing its vaccine is highly effective in 5 to 11-year-olds with a 90.7% efficacy in clinical trials with kids. Last night at a town hall, President Biden sounded a hopeful note over getting younger children inoculated.
I've spent a lot of time with the team on these things. There's likely to be approved.
Here with us now is CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson. Lori, thanks for joining us. Let's just hang right here with kids. When do you expect children ages 5 to 11 years old to be able to get vaccinated? What's the timeline?
Well, the timeline, John, is 2 weeks. So the children who will be getting those first vaccines will likely be getting them in about 2 weeks. The FDA is meeting next week. The CDC is meeting the week after. And so the Biden administration is getting ready to send out these children's vaccines to 25,000 pediatricians' offices. And this is really different from what we saw with the adult vaccines. Mostly the kids are going to be getting their vaccines at the pediatrician's office. So if kids get vaccinated in 2 weeks, they will be fully vaccinated by Christmas. This is a 2-dose regimen separated by 3 weeks. And then after that second shot, it'll be another 2 weeks before a child is fully immunized, that their immune system has fully adapted to the vaccine.
And Lori, as I understand, the dosage is smaller than the amounts that they had given for adults with the Pfizer vaccine.
That's right. And so the individual vaccines themselves look very different, so there won't be any confusing. They have big orange caps, and the needles are smaller to adapt to the younger children. And so once again, these are largely going to be sent out to pediatricians' offices and also to schools. And we know that the 12-year-olds and up, many of those vaccines are also being given at schools, John.
What do you know, based on your research and conversations with parents and pediatricians, do you think many parents will elect to get their kids vaccinated?
Well, a brand new Kaiser Family Foundation poll showed that 1/3 of parents of children between the ages of 5 and 11 say they definitely want to get their child vaccinated and will do so as soon as possible. Another third has said they're going to kind of wait and see, talk to their pediatrician to see if that's the right decision for them. And 1/4 have said they definitely do not plan on vaccinating their child.
Some variation there. Lori, and finally, what do you think are the most important things parents need to understand about these vaccines for young kids ages 5 to 11 years old?
The absolute greatest takeaway, John, is that parents should talk to their child's pediatrician about whether this vaccine is right for this particular child. There are a lot of variables: the health of the child, what's going on in the school, what's going on in the community regarding spread, but also what's going on in your family. Is your child, if your child gets sick, would that child be putting another family member, a grandparent, at risk of severe complications from COVID? So once again, parents should talk to their pediatricians. And if folks don't have a pediatrician, they should contact their public health department, because people who are low income and can't afford health care can also get it for their children, can often get it for their children.
All great advice there, Lori. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson and host of Healthy Living, thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lori. Well, ongoing standstills at the nation's largest port are driving prices up. Other facilities are stepping in to help, but it's not enough to fix the problem. CBN's Brody Carter got a first-hand look at what the country is up against.
Here at the Port of Virginia, they're already soaking up some of that congestion that we're seeing in the West Coast. They're operating very efficiently, and they're hopeful to keep that cargo and turn it into long-term business.
If you take your car and you run it 100 miles an hour every day, that car begins to show wear and tear. The industry is being run every day at 100 miles an hour.
As many as 73 container ships have been waiting to unload goods at the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles over the last week. The largest ports in the nation now a chokehold to the global supply chain.
The warehouses are full. The truck capacity is being soaked up because there's so much cargo that needs to be moved.
LA Long Beach processes about 10 million shipping containers each year. In comparison, all the major ports on the East Coast process a little more than 8 million.
And the ships keep coming.
The supply chain bottleneck is driving inflation. Store shelves are bare, and you've likely felt the impact in your wallet.
Inflation takes its worst toll on those who are at the lowest ladders of income and wealth, poor people. And so for those who are well-to-do, it's just not really an issue. But for the middle class and those who are in lower income groups, that's where the toll is taken. And, it's like they can't get a break.
It's going to take some patience. It's going to take some understanding. And I would ask them, if they know someone in the port industry, thank them, because those folks are working hard. And they are working hard for the American economy.
The strain in this supply chain, it'll endure well past COVID-19, well into 2022. Harris says they just hope they can contain the workload that they've already taken on to help alleviate the problems we're seeing on the West Coast. I'm Brody Carter, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Brody. You're joining us now for our Faith Nation Friday political panel is CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody and Julia Manchester, political reporter with The Hill. Julia, David, thank you so much for joining us and happy Friday. During last night's town hall, President Biden agreed with CNN's Anderson Cooper when he suggested and floated this idea of calling in the National Guard to help truck goods from shore to store. The White House later walked that back, saying that the use of the National Guard is under the purview of governors at the state level. David, what happened here? Did the president get ahead of himself? Was this potentially another presidential gaffe?
Yeah, it was a gaffe. Anytime the White House will walk something back, for sure, it's a gaffe. There is some nuance here. What Biden was really referring to were the local state National Guard troops. However, the nuance here is that there are National Guard troops. In other words, there are certain troops that are designated as federal National Guard troops. And I don't think there was ever really a clarification. Are we talking about the federal or the local? And sometimes it's a combination of both. And so it got a little muddy. White House obviously had to walk that back to clarify everything. So we're talking about state, it sounds to me, at least to be, according to the White House, state National Guard troops.
Washington in overdrive for Democrats, congressional Democrats. Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Majority Leader Steny Hoyer expressed some optimism today, signaling that they will move ahead with their end-of-the-month timeline for a vote on President Biden's domestic spending. Julia, is that achievable or is it wishful thinking?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a question a lot of us are asking. look, there's a lot of debate within the Democratic ranks themselves as to how to move forward. I mean, this week was a roller coaster, I think, in the relationship, the work relationship between Joe Manchin and Bernie Sanders in the Senate, for example, on this. So, you know, in the House, if they want to move ahead, I mean, we'll see how that goes. But I think there's still a lot of skepticism within the party about this legislation, about how to move forward and such. Look, I think right now the Democrats in Washington are under a lot of pressure. They want to pass this major achievement of President Biden's, you know, in his administration as he's overseas, so he can have something to show for himself. On top of that, we have a major gubernatorial race in Virginia that's being viewed as a litmus test for Democrats and Republicans ahead of 2022. So they're under a lot of pressure politically to get this done. So I think, you know, we'll see, but I'm skeptical at this point because I think we've had a lot of dates that have been floated and fell through.
David, I know that you've been skeptical about this date. The White House, though, projecting some confidence here, if you will, signaling that the president's trip late next week, foreign trip, will take place. They're not giving themselves a lot of wiggle room here.
No, they're not. I agree with everything Julia had to say. You know, I'll just say that right now they're in the paring down phase. You know, in other words, what was 3.5 million or trillion? Sorry, I get my millions and trillions confused in Washington. What was 3.5 trillions? What 2.2 trillion possibly? We're talking about the social infrastructure package, not the hard infrastructure package. But even beyond the money, they're trying to figure out what programs they're going to ditch and keep, and the ones that they're going to keep, how much are they going to actually, how much money is going to go to them, and they're going to have to pare all this down. So that's really what's going on. And the question will become, will AOC and her ilk, if you will, in the House really go for it? Remember, AOC had that famous speech, I think it was all over Twitter, something is better than nothing, but nothing's not something. I'm still trying to understand what she was saying, but the bottom line is they might not get anything out of this, actually.
David, I want to stick with you for a moment. The Supreme Court, as we mentioned earlier, will take up the Texas heartbeat law on November 1st. In the meantime, the justices said that they will allow the law to remain in place for the second time. David, is there any scenario in which you can envision this court, which decided to let the law proceed back in September, now turning around and determining that it's unconstitutional? What's at stake here? What exactly are they examining?
Yeah, they sure could, John, rule it unconstitutional. And here's why. The first time around at the court, it wasn't based on the merits. There's really been never an actual merit-based argument on this law, and that's why it's back at the Supreme Court. So the short answer is yes. And my sense of it is you got to watch out for John Roberts if you're the pro-lifers. He might not be on the reservation, if you will. And you got to wonder also about Brett Kavanaugh. So we'll see what happens there.
It is certainly a consequential term when it comes to the abortion question. We all know that there's that Mississippi case that the court is looking at as well. Julia, let's get to a subject that you're quite familiar with, the Virginia governor's race. The latest polls show a virtual tie between the two men with a little over a week to go until Election Day, November 2nd. Republican Glenn Youngkin engaging Terry McAuliffe in a race that is tighter than I think anyone expected. Julia, how much of a bellwether will this contest be for the 2022 midterms?
Oh, I think it's a huge bellwether, John. I mean, you're right. This was closer than anyone would expect. And then, you know, looking at the polls, you know, yes, it's important that it's tight and neck. But I think what's really interesting is the enthusiasm gap. Republicans are more enthusiastic than Democratic voters in Virginia at this moment. Now, Democrats very much trying to turn that around by bringing in former President Obama to the state tomorrow, bringing in President Biden on Tuesday, trying to rally the base. But it seems that I think the Democratic base in Virginia appears to be a bit fatigued from the last election amid the global pandemic. Biden's approval ratings in Virginia have ticked down. There seems to be some frustration with what's happening on Capitol Hill. Democrats haven't gotten that big victory yet from President Biden on Capitol Hill. So that's an issue. But it's so interesting, John. I was at a rally in Burke, Virginia on Tuesday night, and Glenn Youngkin drew a crowd of nearly 1,000 people. And he was the main event. There were no surrogates. It was just Glenn Youngkin, this person who really was virtually unknown to most voters at the beginning of the year. And he's been able to draw some of these crowds from conservative parts of the state, but also parts of Northern Virginia that have been Democratic strongholds. So I think that tells you something about the enthusiasm here.
That certainly does. Something to keep an eye out for. Julia Manchester and David Brody, thank you both so much. If it's Friday, it's our time for our Friday Nation political panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You bet. Have a good weekend.
Coming up, parents are fed up with public schools. Why that matters in the upcoming Virginia's governor's race. Next. Welcome back. From transgender bathroom policies to alleged cases of sexual assault to school curricula that have parents fed up, these are just some of the issues animating voters in this off-year election. So what impact will they have on the Virginia's governor's race and beyond? CBN's Tara Mergener has the latest.
After months of turmoil over COVID restrictions, critical race theory, and transgender policies, there are now reports of 2 sexual assaults by a gender-fluid boy. The county's new bathroom policy and a recent change to state law are back in the spotlight.
Superintendent Scott Ziegler apologizing after 2 girls reported the sexual assaults on school grounds.
I'm sorry that we failed to provide the safe, welcoming, and affirming environment that we aspire to provide.
According to the Commonwealth's attorney, the same teenager is accused in both incidents that happened months apart at different Loudoun County high schools. In one, the attack took place in a girls' restroom. The alleged attacker allowed access by the school's transgender policy. Scott Smith, father of that victim, is suing the school system after being arrested while trying to confront the board at a recent meeting.
The whole thing was handled poorly.
The superintendent and the school board members insist they were not aware of the specific details of this incident until it was reported in media outlets.
Mr. Ziegler, how could have you lied to all of these parents about what had happened to my daughter?
This all brings renewed criticism on 2 controversial measures. The county's recently adopted rule allowing transgender students to use restrooms that match their gender identity, a policy supported by Virginia's Board of Education, and HB 257, a bill passed in the legislature by the Democrat majority that ended mandatory school reporting of certain crimes, including sexual battery.
So that parents aren't aware, so that law enforcement isn't aware. And I think that had a direct impact on how they handled both of these rapes.
Amid the latest fallout, one school board member abruptly resigned, and there are new calls for the superintendent to step down.
His false statement on June 22nd and his failure to keep an alleged assailant out of school are far worse and merit immediate termination.
And that was Tara Mergener reporting. Thank you, Tara. 2 of the biggest races include statewide contests in Virginia and New Jersey, where voters head to the polls on Tuesday, November 2nd to elect their governors. You can watch our special election night coverage on the CBN News Channel. Well, when we come back, why placing a local call may require more time and effort starting this weekend, and the intriguing connection to mental health when Faith Nation returns. Well, starting Sunday, it may take you a little longer to place a local call. 10-digit dialing will now be required in more places around the country, even for calls in the same area code. The change is to prepare for a new mental health suicide prevention 3-digit hotline, much like dialing 911 for emergencies. The new 888 number for suicide prevention will go live in July of 2022. Well, joining us now is a familiar face to those of us here at CBN News, maybe not so familiar to you, CBN makeup artist Chanel Abrams. She's here today to advance the conversation about mental illness because she's also an author writing the book Anxiety Free, a how-to guide rather to combat anxiety both spiritually and practically. Chanel, welcome to Faith Nation. This rollout of the 988 suicide prevention hotline, Chanel, reflects both the prevalence and urgency of the issue. How much of a role does anxiety play for people dealing with suicidal thoughts?
Well, what happens with anxiety is it's this forward thinking, these runaway thoughts. And so going parallel with that is depression. And so the hurry up and do it, hurry up and do it, hurry up and do it, which doesn't allow the person to think logically. So that's how anxiety and depression go hand in hand, which then lead to suicide, unfortunately.
Well, I know your book talks a lot about your own personal journey with anxiety, Chanel. How did you overcome it? And then secondarily, why did you decide to write about it and put it out there for all to read?
Well, I always say this. Of course, it takes the power of God for you to overcome anything. But I say you need God, you need a church, a good Bible study, and a therapist. Honey, don't sleep on the therapist. You need a therapist along with that in order for you to work through the issues of trauma that you may have experienced in the past to help you work through the issues of anxiety. And then help me out. What was the second question?
Yeah, so why did you decide to write about your own personal experience and put it out there for everyone else to know about your own journey?
Well, I was prompted by the Holy Spirit to share what it is that He gave me and how I overcame anxiety myself, and to share those with others. Because what's good if you have something that you can't share with others? So I decided that I would write it and put it out there in hopes that it would help someone else.
Chanel, I know there are a lot of other how-to books out there. What makes your book different than others?
Well, I believe in breaking down things into practical, applicable steps, right? So I believe that you need those steps in order to get through things. And sometimes, well, all the time with anxiety, when it's this rush of emotions, you don't really know how to respond. So I thought that it would be great to have practical steps as to how you can combat a panic attack when it comes on, because it comes in like a flood, like it comes in like a rush. And if you don't have anything, any tips, any tools in your toolkit in order for you to combat that panic attack, then you really don't have anything that you can draw from. So in my book, I take step by step where you can apply the things that I've given you in order to make it through panic attacks.
Chanel, real quickly here, we have just about 30 seconds left. You're also an ordained minister. Do you think the church's long-held stigma surrounding mental health issues has started to wane at all?
Absolutely. I think because people like myself and other ministers and pastors are speaking out about the importance of mental health in the Christian community. Listen, they experience mental health issues in the Bible. We're going to experience them here today, in today's time. And I think as more people begin to speak about it, then it will begin to take away what anxiety looks like, or what depression may look like. So I think that has started to be shattered as more people are starting to speak out about it.
Chanel Abrams, author of the book Anxiety Free, and also one of our dearest friends here at CBN. Thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you.
And we'll be back right after the break. And finally tonight, we remember the life of a Catholic nun known for her years-long crusade against nuclear weapons. Sister Megan Rice was arrested nearly 40 times in her quest for justice and served 2 years in prison at the age of 82 after cutting through a fence at a government facility known as the Fort Knox of Uranium, protesting its stockpile of nuclear weapons material. The sister of the Society of the Holy Child Jesus studied biology at Villanova University and taught students in Nigeria and Ghana. Sister Megan was 91 years old. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you back here on Monday.